We earlier on spoke about the emergence of the Arab dawn, where we saw radical transformations happening in North Africa. Most recently, we've seen the United Nations, through Resolution 1973, authorizing NATO and a coalition of countries to engage in military operations in Libya. However, a lot of people have been critical of these operations, saying they now amount to a regime change process, where not the protection of civilians has been the principal interest, but it appears that taking out Muammar Gadaffi has been the priority for the NATO coalition.
You know, I think, Chris, that's a misperception, but I understand it because NATO and Arab states that are flying with NATO are trying to protect civilians, and the goal is to get a ceasefire from Gaddafi's troops. Unfortunately, that has not happened. He continues to order attacks. You know, Misrata was under siege, and really the opposition fighters inside Misrata withstood an enormous deluge of brutal attacks, not just from the outside in, but placing tanks and other equipment inside Misrata. So the Gaddafi forces were driven out. Now they're trying to go back and attack Misrata again. They've regrouped. He apparently has mercenaries who are willing to fight for money. And it's unfortunate. We've all said the same thing. It's been a uniform message from across the international community to Gaddafi: please have a ceasefire. Quit attacking your own people. Tell those who are fighting for you to return to their barracks. Let's stop the fighting and begin the political and economic transition. So far, he's been not just resistant but defiant. And his forces are fighting in the west. They're fighting in central Libya. The opposition's gotten much better, so they're better able to protect themselves, but they still don't have access to the kind of equipment that Gaddafi is using against his own people.
Very quickly, Madam Secretary, on the same issue, when is it justified to intervene in a particular country? We see the West intervening in Libya. Why not Syria? Why not Yemen? When is it justified? Who decides when one should move in and who should move in? Is it the people of that country who should decide when you should intervene, or outside should intervene?
Frank, that's one of the hardest questions that can be asked. And I think there are certain factors that people look at. Take Libya, for example, again. There was an opposition that was organizing itself against him and was able to speak for the people of Libya. It was a very clear message that was being heard. The Arab League, for the very first time ever, said, given what Colonel Gaddafi said, that he was going to hunt down his own people, he was going to go house to house, he was going to shoot them like, I think, rats, he said. And we knew that he had an incredible military capacity. So when the Arab League asked the United Nations to act, that was a very significant development, because you usually don't see regional forces. Now, here in Africa, African countries have asked for assistance in Somalia. So when there are situations that develop where the region itself says, this is unacceptable, we have to do something. Or in Cote d'Ivoire, where the United Nations was there to try to keep peace, and unfortunately, former President Gbagbo was intent upon waging war. There is no guidebook. Unfortunately, I wish there were, but there's not. Syria, for example, is engaging in horrific, revolting attacks on its own people. The region, however, is trying to behind the scenes get the government to stop, and they believe that that at the time is the best way to go forward. So we listen very closely to what people in the neighborhood, in the region say. And for the United States, it was the Arab League action that really tipped the balance. And increasingly, the African Union and African members are saying the same thing, that he has to go, that he is too destabilizing.